Well, good morning. How are you doing this morning? You're nearing the end of a school year, and you could be thinking about all kinds of things. Exams, projects coming up, or maybe just ready for adventure this summer. Are you ready to listen? How good of a listener are you? Did you ever think about that? Thinking about listening takes me back to a memory in the early 80s that I had when I was building a little log house in the Glen Ellen area. And at the time, I was very busy because I was teaching counseling and psychology classes at a little Bible college called Alaska Bible College. And I was also had a counseling office at Faith Hospital. So I was busy. And I hired a friend of mine to help me build that little log cabin. And this particular time, since I was real busy, I was thinking about my project while I was driving home one day from the hospital. And when I arrived home, my friend met me at the door, and he had something on his mind that he wanted to talk about. It was heavy on his heart. So I listened. And as he began to share with me, I was responding to him and giving some nonverbal responses and interjecting once in a while. And this went on for a while. Pretty soon, my mind was on the project that I wanted to work on. And it wasn't long before I had a tape measure out, and it went over, and I started measuring for the project that I was working on. But I was listening. I was giving responses to him. And pretty soon, he went silent. And after a short silence, he said, "Are you listening?" I said, "Yeah, I'm listening." And then I was really thankful for my training, because we were taught how to listen in some of the counseling training. And I repeated back to him all the things that he'd been telling me. Grateful that I could do that. He was silent again. And this time, after a longer, pregnant silence, he said, "I didn't ask if you heard all the words. I asked if you were listening." Those words penetrated. I didn't ask if you heard all the words. I asked if you were listening. We can easily be distracted by something else when we're listening. Might be distracted by some project, like I was. Or you might be thinking about what you want to say when there's a break in the conversation. Listening is hard work. Well, why is that? Is it just the lack of skill, or is there more to listening than that? Did you know that you can listen 3 to 5 times faster than you can speak? So right now I'm probably speaking to you somewhere around 100 words a minute, maybe 125. You have the capacity, the mental capacity, to process words at a rate of around 400 words a minute. So listening to my words right now only takes about 25% of your mental capacity. So what are you doing with the spare time in your brain? It's easy to get distracted and start thinking about other things while you are listening. Your phone vibrates, and you want to check to see who's calling or who left a text. There's some project that you're thinking about. Or you're thinking about a difficult conversation that you just had with someone. Or perhaps you're thinking about some adventure that you're excited about going on, and you're ready to get preparing for that. Distractions can be pretty much anything. In light of the fact that it takes some effort to focus and listen, some communication experts have come up with some listening techniques to help us focus. You might have heard of the concept called active listening. Basically, it's just a set of practices or techniques that each of us can learn, and it will help us pay attention and listen better. It's things like facing the speaker when you're speaking to them and leaning in and engaging, having eye contact, smiling, nodding, reflecting on what it must be like for them, and clarifying, summarizing, and responding in ways that just let you know that you're with them. These are all things that show that you're paying attention and are tracking with the speaker. We're going to watch a video clip, and I'd like you to notice 3 things. First of all, I want you to notice how the woman in the clip is not really engaged. And secondly, after the guy calls her up short for not listening, she changes. And she makes a determined focus to engage and listen. And then thirdly, I'd like you to try to identify this in the clip if you can. I'd like you to think about what is each of them trying to get from the other person.
First there was PlayStation, aka PS1, then in PS2, PS3, and now PS4, and that makes sense. You'd think after Xbox there'd be Xbox 2, but no. Next came Xbox 360, and now after 360 comes Xbox One. Why 1? Maybe that's how many seconds of thought they put in the naming of it.
Can you get the butter, please?
However, with the Xbox One, I can control my entire entertainment system using voice commands. Up until now, I've had to use Leonard.
Get the other one. Pass the butter.
Hang on. I don't feel like you're taking this dilemma seriously.
Fine, Sheldon. You have my undivided attention.
Okay, now, the PS4 is more angular and sleek looking.
No way!
But the larger size of the Xbox One may keep it from overheating.
You wouldn't want your gaming system to overheat?
No, see, well, you absolutely would not. And furthermore, the Xbox One now comes with a Kinect included.
Included?
Yes. Not sold separately. Although the PS4 uses cool new GDDR5 RAM, while the Xbox One is still using the conventional DDR3 memory.
Why would they still be using DDR3? Are they nuts?
See, that's what I thought. But then they go and throw in an ES RAM buffer.
Oh, wait a second. Who's they?
The Xbox.
You're kidding!
And this ES RAM buffer should totally bridge the 100 gigabit per second bandwidth gap between the 2 RAM types.
This is a nightmare. How will you ever make a decision?
See, I don't know. What should I do?
Please pass the butter!
She engaged, she focused, and she employed techniques of active listening. But was she really listening? She had an agenda. She was trying to get something from him. What was she trying to get? Butter. He also had an agenda. What was he trying to get? Her to listen to him, help him figure out what to do. Exactly right. We have an agenda when we try to make something happen or try to control something that's not entirely in our control. And something happens inside. When my friend said, I didn't ask if you heard all the words, I asked if you were listening, I had an agenda. I wanted to get working on my project. Even though I was listening to him and even employing some active listening techniques, I wasn't really listening very well. I was distracted. So we can hear words and interact with someone without really listening. So what I want to emphasize is that while it's good for us to learn active listening techniques and employ those techniques, we still might not be listening very well. There's more to listening than technique. Listening is also a heart issue. And heart issues don't get resolved by becoming more skillful in technique. You can actually use skillful techniques to become skillfully manipulative. Listening is about engaging your heart and paying attention. It's tuning into the other person. And I like that word, paying attention, the phrase. So just think about that. It's attention given to another, focused on them. And paying implies that it's going to cost you something. Paying attention does cost you. You have to set aside your own desires and agendas in order to pay attention to another. Listening is part of showing someone that you care. It shows that you value them, and it demonstrates love. Ben Boast of Love and Transformation Institute said this: out of a deep concern for the well-being of another person, to love them is to know, want, and do what is in their best interest. That's a pretty accurate description of biblical love, isn't it? To do that, it requires that we're going to have to work harder to understand than to be understood. So listening leads to better understanding of a person and better caring for the person. It's a better ability to know, want, and do what is in their best interest. Are you listening? James 1:19 says that we're to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Pretty profound. A lot put up in those two little phrases. Quick to listen and slow to speak. James is reminding us how important it is to listen. To reinforce this just a bit more, I'd like to put some actions to it. So put your hand up by your ear, quick to listen. And then as if you're slowing down traffic at an accident scene, you're trying to slow the traffic down, put that hand up by your mouth on slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Now let's take a closer look at the passage where James said, be quick to listen and slow to speak. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. First of all, look at how he starts this section. He says, my dear brothers, this is family. Closer and more important than blood family. It's more long-lasting. Next he says, take note of this. If he's saying take note of this, it must be pretty important. What's the next word? Everyone. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. But why did he have to go add this next part about anger? Wasn't it enough to say, be quick to listen, slow to speak? But he throws this in part and he said also slow to anger. Well, that's where our agendas come in. We have an agenda when we try to control something that's beyond our control. And anytime our agenda is blocked, we will experience anger. James is telling us that we need to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. But then he tells us why. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life God desires. It does not result in right living in relationship with others as God desires for us to live. Your agenda might be as simple as getting someone to listen to you, or getting someone to pass the butter. What's wrong with wanting someone to pass the butter? Nothing. What's wrong with wanting someone to listen to you? Nothing. What's wrong with wanting to get a project started? Nothing. Nothing's wrong with desiring those things and even putting forth significant effort to accomplish them. The problem is not in desiring them. The problem is when the desires become an agenda. It's when you try to control something that's beyond your control. Yet, much of the time, you don't even notice your agendas. As long as things are going along smoothly, you're oblivious to them. It's when your agenda gets blocked that you notice it. In other words, the thing that you're trying to control isn't happening. Something or someone has blocked your agenda. There's now an obstacle in the way of the things that you're trying to control. And the result? Anger. When your agenda is blocked, you feel it emotionally. You might first notice just a little irritation or frustration. You might feel a little on edge, and your heart gets a little bit more hardened. These are just the first clues of anger. Anger always lies underneath the frustration and irritation. But it's not always easy for us to see, and it's especially not easy for us to admit. There's a reason for that. It's because there's a self-righteous component in our anger. I'm angry because you didn't pass the butter. Because you're not listening to me. I'm angry because you did this, or because you didn't do this. Our anger feels justified. And then we feel self-righteous in our anger and defensive. Remember the tone of voice in the woman in the clip? Please pass the butter. She was frustrated and angry. Whenever your agenda is blocked, there will be anger underneath, whether you recognize it or not. You guys are living in Palmer. Let's say that you have a very important appointment in Anchorage to go to. This one is of extreme importance, maybe more than you've had up to this point in your life. And it's something that you must be there and you must be on time. And if you don't, it cannot be rescheduled. So you plan for it, you get ready for it, and in the morning you leave in plenty of time because you want to make sure that you're going to make it. You go out to your car, you get in the car, start it, and you notice the gas gauge is sitting on empty, really empty. Well, you've allowed extra time, so you proceed to the gas station, and of all the mornings for there to be a car in front of every pump. Not only that, there's a line behind every car. Do you feel a little tension coming up? Finally, you get up and fill the car with gas and start down the highway to Anchorage. And of all the mornings, the traffic is just creeping. And you're just sitting there and then moving ahead a little bit and creeping. You know, what has happened? And finally you see a huge load of something that's pilot cars in front and back and taking all the lanes of traffic, just enough for someone to squeeze it by on using the shoulder as part of the road. Now it's getting really tight. Finally you get around and move on in, and you enter Anchorage, and pretty soon you're coming to traffic lights. Everyone turns red. What are you feeling? Finally, you get to your street, turn down your street, and a road grader backs out in front of you, blocks both lanes of traffic, and gets out and goes and starts talking to someone on the sidewalk. What's going on inside? Get to your appointment, it's too late. You didn't make it. Do you feel the anger, the frustration? Do you notice how the self-righteous part of that shows up? You're angry because who in their right mind would leave the gas tank empty? And what about that wide load, super wide load, going down the highway at that time in the morning? Why then? And that traffic engineer who designed those lights and the timing of them? And what about that road grader operator? Who does that? I'm angry because, and you feel self-righteous in your anger. Do you notice that all the reasons are outside of yourself? Things that you could not control. Consequently, your anger feels justified. And you feel self-righteous. It gets worse. Not only is there a self-righteous component to anger, there's a malicious component. You become willing to harm others who get in the way of accomplishing your agenda. Look at the next verse. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. You become willing to harm anyone who gets in the way of accomplishing your agenda. You're willing to harm them with your words, with your actions, your attitude. James 4:1 says, "What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You want something, but don't get it." There it is. It's a blocked agenda. You want something, but don't get it. The emotional response? Self-righteous anger. The behavioral response can get malicious. Next verse. You kill and covet, but you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and fight. What are the behaviors? You quarrel. You fight. You even commit murder in your heart. In other words, you're willing to harm in order to get your agenda met. One person put it this way: I want what I want when I want it. And if you will help me get it, good. But if not, I will run over you to get it. Man's anger does not bring about the righteous life God desires. It does not result in right living in relationship with others as God desires us to live. In this passage, all of this anger stuff is said in the context of being quick to listen, slow to speak. But there's more. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like a man who looks at his face in a mirror, and after looking at himself, goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But the man who looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues to do this, not forgetting what he has heard, but doing it, he will be blessed in what he does. Did you ever have one of those nightmare dreams where you had a really important meeting to go to in the morning? And in the dream, you wake up, stumble into the bathroom, and look in the mirror, and oh my, it isn't pretty. Your hair is all matted, your eyes are matted, garlic breath. And then in that dream, all of a sudden you realize that you've overslept and you've got to get to your meeting. So you run out the door, rush to your meeting, and to your horror, walk in still in your pajamas. It's a good thing it's a dream. That's a bad dream. That's a picture that James has given us when he says we're to hear, when we hear the word, but don't follow through and live it. James warns us not to be like that. He also gave us a little phrase that I don't want you to gloss over. He said, don't just listen to the word, but do what it says. And that little phrase, it's stuck right in the middle, and I just left it out, and there it is. And so deceive yourself. That's why it's like waking up from a bad dream. You've all probably had the experience of being deceived by someone. It's a sickening feeling. But this is not someone else deceiving you. This is self-deception. Deceiving yourself while thinking everything is fine. Don't merely listen to the word and so deceive yourself. Do what it says. Listening to God and His word requires obedience. Self-deception is a very dreadful thing. So when God speaks to us through His Word, we need to listen and do what it says. Jesus always calls us to obedience-based discipleship. Always. And when we don't obey, we're opening ourselves up to self-deception, and that's scary. So what does God's Word say about listening to others? We're going to slide back up to verses 19 and 20. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, for man's anger does not bring about the righteous life God desires. Well, how do we do that? First of all, let's answer the question of what's the righteous life that God desires? It's living in right relationship with God and with others. When Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment is, He answered and says, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And He said the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Jesus summed it up like this. Love God and love others. In Galatians 5:6 we read, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. If He says this is the only thing that counts, He's stating something of supreme importance. We are to love with a love that's committed to the very best of others. And in order to do that, we must rely on God's love for us. He was committed to our very best. He sees all the agendas and the garbage inside of us, and He sent His Son to pay the penalty of it all so that we could be in right relationship with Him. And now He asks us to love others. Be committed to their good. So when it comes to listening, loving God and loving others should be our focus. We all want to be heard and understood. There's nothing wrong with that desire. It's a good desire. But as a follower of Jesus, we are to be more concerned about others than we are ourselves. Philippians 2:3-4 says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself. Let each of you not only look to his own interest, but also to the interests of others. But what about when things get a little crazy? It's easy to slip into saying things like, I don't understand how he could do that. I don't understand how he could say that. It makes no sense. Well, guess what? Everything everybody does makes sense to them. Even if it's crazy, it makes sense to them. Can you care enough to listen to them and seek to understand what is going on inside of them? Everyone has a story, and everything gets filtered through your story. It's your frame of reference. And sometimes people have crazy ideas and do crazy things. At those times, it's easy to talk about them and say things like, Who does that? Why would anyone do that? Are those questions seeking to understand? No, of course not. They are questions that are meant to be critical and demeaning. Proverbs 18:2. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. Too often, we're quick to talk about someone rather than to listen to them and understand them. It's often in the context of someone understanding us and caring deeply that we can see things that are amiss in our life. No one's ever encouraged to change through condemnation. I recently reconnected with an old friend from 30-some years back, and as we were talking, he described an incident where we had a mutual friend, and the incident that he described was his friend coming over for dinner, which they did quite often, but he was very agitated about something related to the organization that he was working for. And that particular evening, he was just kind of venting his frustrations to his friends. This is how he described it. At some point during the meal, I went on a 5-minute verbal tirade about my issue. Bob listened quietly without saying a word. When I finally ended my verbal diarrhea, Bob quietly said 2 sentences to me about my position. Those 2 sentences made so much sense and were so insightful and so dismantled my position that I said, "You're right," and I smiled and forgot all about my issue. He listened to understand, and when he understood, he said a truth that I was missing and released me from my bondage. He loved me well. Listening is hard work. We have to pay attention. And we also have to give grace for what may be wrong in their heart. Furthermore, we have to pay attention to what's going on in our own heart. We have to be aware of distractions and agendas that get in the way of listening. When you pay attention, it's going to cost you something. You have to set aside your desires and focus on the desires of another. But when you set aside your desire to be heard for the sake of listening to someone else, you move towards caring about them. You move towards loving them well. So how do we listen better? Remove distractions. Set aside anything that will distract you from paying attention. Get your body involved, not just your ears. Eye contact, posture facing, leaning in. And when you're responding to someone, you're responding with more than just your words. Your tone of voice, your nonverbals, your body language is also communicating. And interact with the one you're listening to. Be active, not passive. Active listening is active participation. Don't just sit there like a bump on a log without saying anything. That would be what we call passive listening. You can hear everything that's being said, and you can be tuned in and even focused. But if you just sit there without responding, the speaker has no idea of whether you're really understanding what they're saying. You're just speaking words into the air then. I recall a conversation that I had many years ago with a man. He was very vulnerable and was describing to me a significant struggle that he was going through. And when he finished telling me, I was kind of overwhelmed. And I just sat there and thought about what he'd been saying. And after a few moments, he said this: I just poured my heart out to you, and your silence makes me feel like it doesn't matter to you. I hadn't responded to him. If you don't know what to say, at least say, I don't know what to say. You don't have to have the perfect words to say. Just engage your heart. And if your heart is engaged, you will be paying attention. And your words may surprise you as to how easily they float to your mind. You will naturally have words when your heart is engaged. Listen and try to understand and feel what it must be like for the person sharing. Engage your mind, engage your body, and engage your heart. Seek to put yourself in their shoes and understand what it must be like for them. And then communicate that understanding to them. Listening conveys that the person speaking to you is important. You care about them, and you care about whatever might be going on inside of them. So listening is part of loving them well. So how well do you listen? Over the years, I've had several people tell me that I'm a good listener. But an honest assessment would include many, many times when I fail to listen well. I want to be a better listener because I want to be a better lover of others. But most of all, I want to be obedient to the God of the universe who has spoken. I want to listen to him. And one of the things that he is saying, be quick to listen, slow to speak. Put others ahead of yourself. Love them well. So first of all, listen to God. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Listen to God. He's the only 100% sane being in the universe. Secondly, be obedient to God and listen to others. You can't really know what's going on inside of someone unless you listen for understanding. It's only then that you can speak words of comfort and wisdom to a troubled heart. It's then that you can love them well. So I don't know where you're at, but I do know that listening is important. And we never arrive at a place where we can say, I'm a really good listener. There's too many distractions, too many agendas, and we're too selfish. It's going to have to be an ongoing priority. So be quick to listen, slow to speak. I'm going to end with another movie clip.
My rocket! Wait, well enough, using the rocket. It still has the song parallel. Who's your friend who likes to play? No! No, you can't leave my rocket to the top. Why you are going to the moon? I think can't be done with me.
Hey, it's
okay? We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
And a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster. Hey, Bing Bong, look at this. Oh, here's a fun game. You point to the train station and we all go there. Won't that be fun? Come on, let's go to the train station.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
It's all I left with Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time, we had breakfast twice that day.
Sadness.
Sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends.
Yeah.
I'm okay now. Come on. The train station is this way.
How did you do that? I don't know. I'm sad, so I listen.
Joyous sadness. How he did that. And he was I don't know. He was sad, so I listened. Thank you for listening.